Fanfiction, a history. I know what most of you think when you hear that word. Fanfiction. Oh God,
you say to your conveniently placed neighbor.
What will they think of next? Maybe you throw in a casually derisive joke about bondage because you heard all that hubbub about 50 Shades of Grey being mommy porn a couple years ago. If you're the pedantic type, you might complain about the general dissolution of literature, or the nullification of the sacredness of copyright laws at the hands of hormonal prepubescent girls. If the idea of fanfiction repels you, listen.
That is okay.
I'm not here to yell at you. I'm here to explain that fanfiction, at its roots, may not be what you think it is, that it's been around a lot longer than you think, and that if you had an average education, though you may not know it, you have read fanfiction.
Yes, you!
You there. I see you. I'm talking to you, sir or madam of indeterminate age. So, without further ado, I give you Fanfiction, a history. First, what the hell is fanfiction? Most sources I checked agreed that it could be defined as a written work of fan labor, set in the world or using the characters of a previous published work. My favorite was Lev Grossman's idea that fanfiction is what literature might look like if it were reinvented from scratch after a nuclear apocalypse by a band of brilliant pop culture junkies trapped in a sealed bunker. They don't do it for money. That's not what it's about. The writers write it and put it up online, just for the satisfaction. They're fans, but they're not silent, couch-bound consumers of media. The culture talks to them, and they talk back to the culture in its own language. It has a few aliases in academia, fanfiction does. Transformative works, derivative works, transmedia storytelling. It's been around in some form or another for hundreds of years. Don't believe me? Examples. There are tons of modern books based around previously published characters or worlds. Ophelia is fanfiction of Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, again Hamlet. Lady Macbeth's daughter, fanfiction of, you guessed it, Macbeth. Odysseus in the Serpent Maze, Hippolyta in the Curse of Amazons, Atalanta in the Arcadian Beast, Jason in the Gorgon's Blood, all fanfiction of Greek myth writers. East by Edith Patow, fanfiction of a Scandinavian legend. The Goose Girl and Daughter of the Forest, both blatant fanfiction of fairy tales. Elf Hunter, fanfiction of Lord of the Rings. Sure, but that's all modern stuff. Where's the history come in? Well, dear viewer, I'm glad you asked. Remember the Aeneid? It was written by Virgil, centered completely around a guy named Aeneas, who appeared briefly in Homer's The Iliad years before. Virgil took Homer's character and wrote an epic about him, and then Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, took Virgil's, or was it Homer's, character and wrote an epic about him. That's pretty definitely fanfiction, guys. Arthur Conan Doyle's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes spawned several fan-written versions. Carroll's Alice Adventures in Wonderland inspired spin-off novels by Nesbit and Burnett. And the Bronte sisters wrote what is referred to today as real person fiction, or RPF, about the first Duke of Wellington and his sons. How about Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
Really?
Yes, dear viewer, really. Be honest, though. Look at the plot of Romeo and Juliet and tell me that's not fanfiction. That play is textbook fanfiction.
Literally.
What the Bard did was take a really bad Italian play, change the names of characters, a couple plot points, flip the themes around, and voila! Successful play. But that isn't fanfiction. That's how you make literature. And to you I say, wow, viewer, I think you're starting to get it. A brief aside, in case you're not getting it. Prior to the 18th century, the concept of intellectual property in the literary world was not really a thing. Authors worked and reworked plots and stock characters all the time, usually circulating these stories as letters to groups of wealthy, like-minded men and women who might read it, like it, and circulate their own stories based on that. Does this sound familiar? It should. This is essentially what today's internet fanfiction archives do, and what the sci-fi fanzines of the 60s did.
Bacchanalia, anyone?
It's just in the last 100-some years that copyright laws, the spread of literacy, and the establishment of originality as a tenet of the modern literary world that the term fanfiction even became necessary. Fanfiction isn't the seedy pop culture underbelly of respectable literature. It's simply the modern continuation of 1,000 years of folklore, community interaction, and utterly free, no strings attached, just for fun storytelling. So, viewer, fanfiction shouldn't repel you. It's not new, or weird, or subversive. It is, in fact, historically awesome. It's always been around, and it's always going to be around.
Well, as long as humans breathe and write and aren't exploded into a billion pieces by the heat of our dying sun, which is totally gonna happen.
But as always gets is what I mean. This has been Fanfiction, a history, the first unit in our first topic section. Links to support my wild claims are in the doobly-doo. Props to whoever wants to invent a drinking game based on how many times I said fanfiction in this episode. Stay tuned next week for Jesse, the fanfiction noob in our dynamic duo, to review a selection of Harry Potter fanfics, and also to gobble like a turkey, because I so want to see that, and now she has to do it, because I said it on the internet.